I just want to thank everybody for attending my presentation. It's wonderful to see so much interest on the subject of growing sustainable roses. And my hope and prayer is that you will all go away with motivation to try and plant your own rose in a sustainable way. So I wanted to start off by talking about myself a little bit and roses. I am the middle. I'm a middle child of seven siblings. I've got 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And of course, when you're in a family that large, sometimes you just need to get away, get out. And I would always go outside to find peace, beauty in nature, to get exercise and have that mind, body, and spirit stress relief. So that was always, again, part of just kind of my growing up. And then my mom was a dance teacher, so I am a lifelong dancer. And she took us to dance lessons when she went to teach. And she also made me aware of plant names and their differences. It was never just, oh, look at that tree. It was always, look at that magnolia tree. She would name them. Or what a beautiful flower. No, she would say, that's a wonderful wisteria. So the fact that she always pointed out the names of plants was always stuck in me as to learn more about plants and how they grew. And then I served after being in, after my bachelor's degree from UC Davis, I served in the US Army at Tripler Army Medical Center in Honolulu, Hawaii, and was a medic and then patient care specialist there. And the fragrance of the flowers in Hawaii, that was one of the most memorable things that I remember about being in Hawaii, was the flowers and the smell of it in the air. I met my husband, my future husband, there when I was in the Army there in Hawaii, and we had 7 of our own kids. My first son was born at home in Hawaii, and then the next 4 I had at home. I did home births in Chicago, and my last 2 births were in Rio Vista, which is where I still live now. In my spare time growing up and raising my children, and what spare time I had, I was in the garden, and they can attest to that, all my kids, growing things, roses, fruit trees, anything that, that you can grow and then get the reward of bringing in the fruit, bringing in the flowers to share with others and enjoy yourself. It just, again, makes gardening so much better that you can enjoy that. After special education preschool teacher, I retired after 15 years teaching special needs children, and my husband had passed away about 10 years ago. My children were all grown and gone when I retired, so I started looking into gardening again and found the Land and Water Caretakers course through Sustainable Solano, through our local paper here in Rio Vista, the Beacon, and did that in early 2020 when the pandemic was first coming out. We were lucky we kind of got that class in before all the mask mandates, etc. And then this past year, earlier this year, I took the permaculture design class and really enjoyed it. And again, like Nicole was saying, I had this opportunity to design or conceptually design the Veterans Rose Garden. So that's why I'm here. And I want to start off with talking a little bit about the movie Forrest Gump did, or Tom Hanks did. He played Forrest Gump in the 1994 film. And he was sitting on a park bench when a lady came and they were waiting for the bus. And he said to her, "My mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." Well, growing sustainable roses is not like a box of chocolates. You can know what you're gonna get. Okay, so it's not about perfection. This book by Peter Kukielski, Roses Without Chemicals, was the resource book that I had used the most in designing and just learning all about roses. Peter talks all about the history and the basic knowledge about roses in his book. It was published or published in 2015. So it's a fairly recent book. I got my first copy out at the library, so it is available through the library, but then I purchased it after taking back the library copy for just around $20. So it's well worth the $20, I feel, if you want to know more about roses. And specifically what I found out in his book was that before 2000, rose cultivars and breeders, they were going for that best of show rose. They were going for the perfect rose, the blue ribbon rose. And they were using a lot of synthetic fertilizers and harmful pesticides in their rose growing. And that was only drying out the soil and leaving large amounts of chemical deposits. Well, since 2000, rose trials began worldwide to find roses that were disease resistant, used less water, and required minimal care. These were sustainable roses, and that is actually the definition of a sustainable rose. Good thing for us is that it's, again, so many rose cultivars were just itching to get away from the pesticides because they were harming the soil. They were causing real problems with people's health, and actual examples in a book that I read where a family's pet dog died because of the spraying on the roses. So I don't want to get down on it, but really serious when you use chemicals in your garden, have really dire effects. So have no fear. I have a 5-star recipe here to let you follow so that you don't have to be afraid to grow roses sustainably. Now, 5-star, we think about 5-star as being the best, right? 5-star, and even outside the kitchen, it's still important that we kind of use a recipe, because a recipe is kind of like a guide by someone who knows what they're doing, hopefully. Could be a professional, or could just be people who've done it often enough and willing to share. I use the guide, for instance, the Bible. It helps me to have the instructions for life so that I can live in a way that's pleasing to God. But the recipes for the ratios, it gives us ratios that we will be able to follow, not only just the ingredients, but how much ingredients, the correct order, right? If there's any preparations that we need to do ahead of time, consistent results, we can kind of count on it. And also, if there's any special tools that we need. Might also have some terminology that we don't, or we're not familiar with, that we might need to look up, and even a possibility of some substitutes. If we can't find what we are looking for, we might need to substitute something else in its place. So let's see, we're gonna next discuss the 5-star recipe, and you can read along with me on this slide. According to Peter Kukielski, a rose that is happy in its conditions with plenty of sunshine and healthy soil is going to be naturally healthy and disease resistant in your garden, eliminating any need for harsh chemicals. So our goal as rose caretakers is to simulate what is happening in nature. No one will be able to do it perfectly, but beautiful roses are worth the effort. Okay, so here is the 7-step 5-star recipe for sustainable roses. Okay, number one, observe. We're going to try and use all of our senses. This was one of the principles of permaculture that I learned in my recent class, was that we need to be really observant. And that means taking note of the environmental conditions, how much sun is the area getting. Roses need about 6 hours of full sun. What type of air circulation is happening? Is it excessively hot or cold? Too windy, not windy? And the drainage. Roses need good drainage. So we're going to be using our eyes for looking, our ears for listening to things that are happening in the garden, our nose for smelling things, because you can smell musty or things that just don't smell moldy. Mouth, now tasting was one of the things that we laughed about, where they were encouraging us to taste the soil. Some people did, most of us didn't. But I want to say, instead of tasting, maybe talking, using our mouths to talk out loud, whether we're talking to the plants or letting the plants talk to us, or we're just talking to ourselves. But I think talking is probably a good thing to kind of keep our observation skills keen. And then feeling, our sense of touch is really important when we're out in the garden, because we can feel when it's too wet or too dry. So number two is the soil. Ideally, our soil should be for roses between the pH of about 6 to 6.5. And we know that nearly all water and nutrients taken up by roses come from the soil. So we must understand the nature of our native soils and then amend or manage them to provide roses with what they need. Okay, so research shows that a good soil is alive with micro and macroorganisms that are all interacting together. Healthy roses have what they call a mycorrhiza, and myco means fungus, rhiza means root. So it's kind of a relationship that the roots have with these fungus and small organisms in the soil. I have in my resource on the block with Sustainable Solano some recipes for increasing that action in the soil that you can look at. Also, adding organic matter is a real easy way for us to create good soil. And that good soil is called humus, okay? And it can hold up to 20 times its weight in water. So 1 square foot of this quality soil can hold 40 gallons of water. So it's kind of like a sponge if it's good soil. And it makes sense in terms of water conservation and efficiency to improve the soil so it can retain more water for our plants. Okay, so the soil is real key. Number 3, choose your rows and location wisely. Okay, there are, in Peter's book, he gives regional suggestions as to which roses would perform the best. You can also go to your local nurseries to find out and talk with gardeners about roses that will do well in our areas here in California, Northern California. When you need to know how big your rose is going to get. So you got to do a little bit of homework in picking the right rose for your location. Number 4, mulch. You need about 3-inch layer or 4, but no less than that, of mulch, which decomposes gradually, okay, and keeps the weeds out and the moisture in. Now, a lot of people use rocks in their garden, but rocks are not going to decompose and give your garden that additional organic matter that the soil really needs. And that's, if you do that, again, you're using these components, then you won't need to worry so much about, again, the problems that would happen if you don't. So mulching is really important. Step number 5, drip irrigation. It delivers water slowly and deeply, and it can also limit unwanted weeds. In the first year, your roses need more water than in later years. So the first year is really important to have a good irrigation system in place so that your roses stay well watered. And then number 6, companion planting. I feel like this is going to set your garden apart from any other rose gardens that you see. I've visited several rose gardens, Sacramento, Capitol Mall. There's a couple of rose gardens in Sacramento. They're really lovely. I've gone to roses since doing this research, and it's your typical rose garden that can be, has a lot of space because, again, it's a community rose garden, but oftentimes you don't see companion planting. And what companion planting does is it attracts beneficial insects and adds color, because sometimes the companion plants are going to be blooming when the roses are not, and vice versa. Companion plants can add form and different foliage colors to the garden. And so the biggest thing, I think, is that it can, some of these companion plants can actually repel unwanted insects and also attract beneficial insects. When you plant companions, you want to plant them at least a foot or 12 inches away from your roses so that they don't compete with your roses. And you want to have your companion plants needing the same conditions as your roses. So in other words, they need the same water and sunlight, those kinds of things. And number 7, the last component is integrated pest management, or IPM. And basically what this is managing rather than trying to eliminate pests and diseases in the garden. You're eradicating pests will not only harm the bad insects, but also the good bugs. So in integrated pest management, we want to exert minimal impact on the environment. So you start with natural solutions first. Okay, going back up to the top, you're going to observe. Are you seeing something that is not right for the rose? Is something happening? Too wet? Are you seeing some mold? Okay, or something like that. Or the soil, is it dry? Is your mulch, has it blown away, or is it just really thin and you need to replenish that maybe? There's a lot of things. Again, first make sure that all of these things are working right, and then start with some natural pest management. Again, you might find other 5-star recipes, I should say, that are for roses, and some of the websites that I recommend do have some things, but if they're missing something, any of these 7 components, then they're not doing it fully. So that's why I really want to encourage you to keep with these 7 things so that you can grow sustainable roses. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, so here are some disease-resistant rose selections from Peter's book that he has for picks in California. And you'll notice that they have disease resistance, flowering, fragrance, and then a total. And so he basically rates the flowers in his book, and these are ones that he suggests that would work well in Northern California. The best time of year to select roses is in December and January. You'll have more of a selection, better variety, and I think it's a great time in December and January to think about gifts, either for yourself or for someone else. The key here is the disease resistance ability of these roses. Most of these, or actually all of these roses that Peter suggests, are 2000 millennial roses. Anything after 2000 would be considered a millennial rose. And the more you find out about roses, then you'll realize that there are older roses that are historic roses. But again, you have to make sure they could be older roses, but just make sure that they're disease resistant. That's the most important thing. Okay. Now here is a slide with companion plants. Okay, so why do we want these plants in our rose gardens? They produce nectar and pollen-rich flowers that will attract insects and birds that we're going to aid in our pest control issues. Okay, starting with Allium here on the left corner. It's Latin for garlic. Okay, and it's a flowering onion. The daisy aster is a perennial, okay? And you'll notice that most of these have some purple in them. The million bells petunia is a low-growing companion plant. The Monarda fistulosa is also called wild bergamot or bee balm, and it's about a medium-sized growth. And the sedum is called stonecrop. It's known as stonecrop, and it is a low to medium plant. And then the little picture of the Veronica spicata is also known, common name of spike speedwell, and it grows medium height. Okay, so they have multiple functions, okay? So, and there's so many companion plants. You can choose from perennials, bulbs, grasses, vines, shrubs. Really, the sky's the limit. Now here's some good bugs. I didn't give you any slides of bad bugs. I think good bugs is what we, enough. But the ladybug and the lacewings are aphid predators. And the aphids are bugs that we don't want to see so much in our rose gardens. They suck the sap from the plant. But you can plant garlic and onions, and that would help. Spraying the garden hose with just a water hose sometimes knocks the aphids off of the roses, as well as you could mix garlic and water together and spray for aphids. The pirate bug on the top right and the damsel bug are predators of thrips. Now, thrips is a small brown-winged insect that live and feed inside rose flowers. So having these good bugs in your garden can help combat that. And then the nematodes are microscopic worms in the soil, and they help fight off Japanese beetles because the Japanese beetle grubs exist in the soil. And you can also plant catnip, chives, garlic, and tansy. And then application-wise, you can use a milky spore, which is a bacterial product against Japanese beetles. And I have, on my phone, I have a plant app that helps me like identify plants that because I'm all into learning new plants, but they also have bug identifiers, which can be helpful so that you can know if it's a good bug, a bad bug, or just what kind of bug it is. So you know kind of how to address it and what to do about it. And here's my design for the Rio Vista Veterans Memorial Garden. Some of the parameters that I had in designing this garden was that it was going to be kind of a square 64-foot by 64-foot space between two residences, one that has already been built, the men's residence at the top of the picture, and then the women's residence is future. It hasn't been built yet. But this garden would sit in between. And the veteran commander of the American Legion post in Rio Vista expressed the desire to have a compass rose in the center, which is basically a compass, and it would point north, which is in the direction of the right upper corner is north. And so south would be the left lower corner. West is the upper left side, and then east is the lower right side. So this area gets a good amount of sun. There's no trees, there's no other anything growing at this time on the property. So it has a really good sunlight and air circulation. The soil is neutral. We had tested it when we did the men's residence with the landscape there. And so it's a pH of 7. So one of the other things that was requested was like a 4-way walkway, easy accessibility for people in wheelchairs or walkers. So that's why I designed the walkways, the larger 5-foot walkways coming from the parking lot, which is over here on this side. This is the parking lot from the Veterans Hall. And they were requesting an arbor here, but I thought it also made sense to have arbors, rose arbors from the top where the men's residence would enter, and also at the bottom where the future females residence, and having those rose arbors I thought would be, again, just making things look balanced. I chose a circle design. They mentioned the commander wanted to use all the space, and he kind of drew out a little square design, but I felt like going through the permaculture design class that hard square lines are not what nature does. Nature does curves and circles and spirals, but this to me was a lot more the circle with the outer walk, and then the coming in and doing an inner, like almost like a wagon wheel or a bicycle inner, made it a lot more inviting, and also not so harsh lines. So let's see what else. Those were kind of the parameters. We have on this side of the public works yard is over here on the left side of the design. And there's a chain link fence with barbed wire at the top. So I thought that some smaller palm trees would be kind of stately and look rather nice on this side. Plus, maybe building some trellises or something for some climbing roses to kind of shield the view from that public works yard there on the left. And then the actual rose beds, I counted about probably 24 rose bushes possibly that could go in the larger sections and 12 in the smaller sections. And then using sit spots, benches around the outside of the circle, and then trees that were shade trees, like for instance, maybe Japanese maple that has a beautiful leaf color, and also Chinese pistache, something like that with some filtered sunlight. And then the companion plants that I have listed in here were the catnip and the lilies, oriental lilies along the outer, because they're lower growing. And then the Russian sage, I think is over here. And also delphiniums, which grow a little bit taller. But again, ideally, these companion plants would also be included in the garden, in the rose gardens as well as maybe having some roses out here by the benches. So ideas for fundraising, are down here in the bottom. They didn't have funds for the landscaping, not only of the residents, but also for this rose garden. And so some ideas for being able to fund the rose garden would be to have donations and memorial plaques on the benches, for the trees, obviously for the rose beds, maybe in groups of four roses, that if people wanted to take a whole, like a smaller bed, which is 12, but you can plant roses in groups of 4 and have the color be again just more vibrant if it's not just one rose but a group of 4 or so. Eagle Scouts could maybe do a project by helping with either the trellis or any of the plantings. And so that's pretty much about it, I think, covers my, the signage. The commander had a good idea of possibly using dog tags for labeling the roses, or, and you can put plaques on benches, but I also think you definitely want to have some signage so that people can learn. It could be an educational garden as well when they come, so that if they are interested in planting or finding the rose, that they would be able to see the name of it or the name of the perennial that's planted with the roses. Okay. So here are some examples of, this is my last slide, where it shows that you can plant these other plants alongside the root. Here's some petunias, and I'm not familiar with all of the plants, but this one looks like, again, that Veronica spicata here with some grasses behind the roses. And this one has the same thing. It's either a lavender or a Veronica spicata with, and this is called, this bright one is called Lady's Mantle. And it's another good companion plant that really accents the colors of the roses. Okay, so now that we've shared, now that I've shared my 5-star recipe for growing roses, I hope that you would please share this recipe with others. So go, and may the rose be with you.